I have a wonderful electronic invention I want you to see. It looks something like this.
Welcome to the CTO Studio. I am your host, Etienne de Bruin. CTO Studio is where we chat with CTOs building amazing products, building incredible teams. Have you chatted with a CTO lately?
Red leather, yellow leather.
Nichole MacDonald?
Red leather, yellow leather.
Where's that?
It's like a warm-up technique.
Red leather,
Yellow leather. Red leather, yellow leather.
To get your lips loose.
Red leather, yellow leather. It's hard, huh?
Red leather, yellow leather. That is damn hard. Welcome to the CTO Studio.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here.
I want to congratulate you because you're the very first non-CTO on the show.
For real? Oh, okay.
And the show is focused on CTOs kind of getting out of their cubicle / work environment and to talk about what they're doing so that the masses can hear what they're building and how they're building it. But so I wanted you on the show because as the other side of that coin, the founder / CEO of companies and ideas, I kind of wanted to get that conversation going a bit, sort of how you view the CTO role in your tech company, and we'll get into that. And just kind of speak freely about, how you go about building your businesses and how I think any CTO or even a founder listening to today's show could learn from your experiences.
Okay. Yeah.
Eric, are you laughing at me? So I'll never forget the day I met you. It was at Startup Week in San Diego. You came up to me and basically, if I remember correctly, said, how do we get our CTO to want to build the idea that we're trying to build?
Yes. Yeah, well, we were struggling because I don't come from a technology background or a technology world. I've never had a technology company. I know 0 people. So I was relying on other people, would-be investors, advisors, connecting me with potential CTOs. And the issue that I had was my vision wasn't coming through. And I couldn't tell if I wasn't articulating the vision properly or if they weren't understanding it. And that's where the disconnect began, because the additional questions that would come up and the solutions weren't really speaking to what I was trying to create. And so I started feeling like this was this is my fault. Like I need to understand how to communicate this in a way that a technology person can interpret. So I made this big, huge assumption that it was like, some kind of language barrier between a CEO and a CTO, and wanted to learn how to navigate that. I was even researching books on, trying to learn the language and the lingo so I am saying the right terms to try and get my idea across. And that's what attracted me to the class that you were moderating or the panel that you were moderating. And I can't remember the name of it, but there was something in either the title or the description that was about that. It was about founders communicating with CTOs or something like that, or your tech team, or do you remember?
I don't. It wasn't.
There was something in the language there that made me think, okay, this might be the answer. Yeah. And so this was me and my co-founder, who also is a creative, like way beyond me as far as creativity goes. And so he definitely doesn't have that technology background. I feel like I at least bridge that a little bit because I do have experience with graphic design and product development. But, again, not in technology space. So, we were furiously writing notes, and I think there was a book that was recommended, and it was like, okay, we're going to get that book. But just the way that you even approached communicating with your panelists and the audience made us go, okay, wait, that guy gets it. Like, I think he can help us. And that's why we approached you.
Beautiful. So you, let's I want to kind of get into that space a little bit of you trying to describe your idea and then intuitively feeling like your idea wasn't really coming across. Is it because you were describing the large problem that you wanted to solve, and that the way in which the would-be CTOs described how they would solve it didn't feel right to you? Or was there just an introvert-extrovert issue? Or was there a bit of a glass half empty approach? Like what made you feel like you weren't, maybe the problem was with you? What were you constantly running up against?
Well, in hindsight, I feel that it was just a trust issue for them in believing the vision that I was trying to create. And at the time, I felt like it was me not communicating, because as I was presenting the problem, which everybody agreed with, the problem is easy to explain. People get it. The solution that I wanted to create isn't the simplest solution. It's probably the hardest solution, but it's the best one. And I know that because of my experience in e-commerce. So I knew that this way of doing it is going to be the thing, but every person that I talked to was trying to simplify it down to the easiest and quickest solution.
Okay, so you had a solid idea of the product you wanted to build, but the people that you were discussing that with didn't maybe believe or trust that you knew what the product needed to be.
Sure.
In other words, they felt like, well, instead of doing that, you should maybe look at doing this, and that you couldn't find common ground on that.
Yes. And again, so I thought, okay, I'm not explaining this correctly. And I think they probably felt like, since I didn't have, and this is me just guessing, that since I didn't have that technology background, that I was maybe not even thinking of these other ways that could be easier. And believe me, I thought of all that stuff, and I did a lot of research, and I saw that there were other tools out there similar to what they were recommending. For instance, one of the recommendations was like, well, why don't you just make it a Facebook plugin? Like, that would solve all your problems. And it's like, well, that would solve this very specific problem of capturing payment through live video. Yes. But that's not going to create something, that's not going to create a brand or a business or something that could be really, really huge. And that's what I like to do. I'm not just a problem solver. I am a brand creator. And that's where the discussion gets bigger and broader. And that's where the disconnect started happening.
And so when your investors recommended that you find a CTO, is what I'm assuming they said, what was the image you had in your head? Was it the geeky, stereotypical image you had in your head? Was it what did you think you were trying to find in a person? I'm trying to understand what image you had in your head, or maybe you didn't have anything. But
I wouldn't say I had a specific image in my head. And I knew we were going to need a technical co-founder even before they said that. I just didn't have one. I didn't know one. And they did. So they did have people and know people. And that's just kind of where we started. And the people that they recommended, again, this was my first experience, was, okay, here's who we think would be great for this. And having several meetings that just were frustrating because the vision just wasn't coming together. And we were, whiteboarding and writing things out, and just the language was just missing every single time.
Yeah, it's fascinating for me, having founded 7 CTOs. One of the big things is the ability to communicate complex ideas in a very simple to understand way, through triangles and squares and lines on a whiteboard. But I think that only comes when you have the ability to ingest someone's vision and be able to not be intimidated by someone like yourself who says, I want to create this thing, And then I think because the CTO type often hears those ideas, they mostly incorrectly go towards, oh, well, they're just ignorant, it can't be done, or they don't understand what it takes to build XYZ. And then that impedes their ability to actually collaborate and say, well, hang on, let's assume yes on everything they're saying, and let's try and build that, as opposed to getting into this conversation about, well, they shouldn't be building that. Rather, I should try and get them to build this.
Yeah, so that was the problem right from the very beginning, was just trying to take the big vision away and go and simplify it.
Yeah.
When I really just knew that the big vision is what I needed. And of course, to your point about just saying yes, like, okay, yes, let's do this, and then work backward to, okay, how can we break this out? And it's changed a lot. Like, we've made all kinds of changes, and that's fine, and that's good, and that's great, and I'm happy that, we've been through all the changes we've been through, but we wouldn't have even started if
Absolutely.
we weren't on the same page about what we wanted to create.
And I think the role of the CTO is, to their own people, is mentorship, but also even to the fellow C-suite members or the co-founders. It's being an educator. Mm-hmm. Not an educator in what should or shouldn't be done, but just, hey, if we want to do this, this is what it's going to take, and let's give ourselves as much information as possible to make informed decisions.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what is the app, or what is this technology you're building?
Mm-hmm. So I am building the world's first live video e-commerce platform. So what that is an answer to people who are turning to Facebook Live video and trying to connect with customers and sell product. It's a very effective way to reach people, but there's no e-commerce solution there on Facebook, obviously. People are also using YouTube, Instagram. Anyway, whatever their preferred social media outlet is to utilize live video, because what's better than live video to show your product to your customers? So we're creating a platform for that specifically, but it simplifies the shopping and the selling experience, because the seller can create a live video set up with inventory and one-click button checkout, so that when the customers are viewing the live video, they can just easily shop, just a one-click shop for the items that they're seeing in the video.
So you're combining live video with the ability to do a one-click purchase.
Yep.
With the ability to chat. And so that's obviously a bunch of complex technologies, which I'm assuming I could now see, whereas previous people might have said, oh my goodness, you have to reinvent all these things. What has the process been for you with your technical team to do this? Like, how did you take that idea into sort of reality, and what have you guys been doing?
Well, we broke it down into stages. So first of all, we all agreed on the vision. So that was the biggest hurdle, is having a team that got it and agreed that this is the way of the future and wanted to get involved and were passionate. So once we were all on the same page, then that developed trust. I think that's the hugest part of it, is since I don't have a technology background, the amount of faith that I'm putting in the technology team it puts me in a very vulnerable position. So once we all were on the same page about that, then that gave me permission to let go and let the technology team do what they're best at. And the process has been really great, because they've led that process, not me. So I'm able to focus on what I'm good at. And what they have done is, took this big, huge vision and broke it down into phases, and started, very small, coming up with weekly goals, weekly sprints. First we're just going to create this basic page. Okay, now we're going to start working on the video technology. Okay, now we're going to add the chat. Okay, now we're going to add the buttons. And it's just been such an easy process to digest, that it's worked for me from a non-technical background, because I can see the results every week. I can see it coming together with my own eyeballs,
yes,
without having to understand or try to learn what's going on in the background.
And do you feel like you've gained enough experience where you could maybe tell future founder CEOs what to look for non-technical people, do you feel like you already have enough experience to be able to say to someone who comes to you and says, I have an idea for product X, I want to get it built, what should I be looking for in a CTO? Do I need a CTO? Or do you think that that's still something that's forming?
I feel that I'm getting there. From a personal, like what you're looking for in a CTO from a personal standpoint, absolutely. I'm still learning, what specific things to look for and ask for from a technology perspective. But I do have advisors who know more than I do about that, and they know the right questions to ask. But I haven't ever approached it from that way, like, oh, I should be making note, to give other people advice. So I'd have to think about that a little bit more.
No, I think it's there's always a delicate dance for me between what a CTO should be looking for in a CEO and vice versa. And I think both, I agree with you, the ability to establish trust as quickly as possible. Apart from the fact that you have to like each other, I think you have to, I think I saw an interview recently where someone said, don't be afraid to hire someone based on whether you like them or not, because you ultimately have to see yourself being able to work with them. But I think that immediately when I say that, I'm like, ooh, is HR going to allow me to even do that, But I think ultimately you have to be able to see yourself working with that person on a relationship
Totally.
level.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like getting married. It's like business married, like you can't just jump into that with the wrong person, because you're going to, run into all sorts of problems. I think the personal connection point is very, very strong. And there are some other, I don't even know if you know this, some other CTOs and, tech people that I talk to that I didn't want to move forward with for that reason. So the person that I was referring to earlier, that we just weren't on the same page as far as vision, that's what was the deal breaker in that relationship. But on a personal level, I thought he was really great. Conversely, I did meet with other people that may or may not have gotten the vision. I don't even know, because I didn't even get that far, because after one conversation, it was like, there's no way I could sit with this person day in and day out.
That's fascinating for me, because I think that, and one of the reasons 7 CTOs exists to raise the emotional intelligence of people, because I think oftentimes you have these really smart people who can make fascinating contributions to these startups that are innovating all these new ideas, but they are victims of their own sort of paradigm, where it's just a combative, skeptical paradigm that just won't get anywhere.
Yeah, that's just a fact of life.
So you're currently beta testing the app. How did you manage to bring customers to this platform? Because I think when we spoke about it, what fascinated me was how you mentioned people were using existing live video platforms to do their sales, but that they were using some hokey way to actually buy products. So tell us about that, and then tell us how you turned those people into your audience.
Sure. So I have a product line called Sash bags, and it's a very unique product line. I'm the only person. I invented it. I have a patent on it. I produce it. I'm the only person who sells it. So anybody who wants one has to buy it from me. So that's good.
Thesashbag.com.
Thesashbag.com. So
it's a Shopify website.
It is a Shopify website, yes.
Have you considered moving away from Shopify ever?
Not for my basic e-commerce, no.
Okay. So just a...
Yeah, it's fine. My needs are simple.
I'm assuming you're on the super duper plan with Shopify.
I am on the super duper plan. But for the first few years of my business, so I've been in business for 5 years with Sash. The first 3 years I spent just selling face to face. So I went out every weekend, festival, farmer's market, concert, and just got my product in front of people's faces and sold it that way. And then I gathered all that information, all that feedback, and that's how I created my online marketing strategy. So when I launched my online strategy in the spring of 2016, it took off pretty quickly because I knew who I was marketing, who my customer is, what they like, how much they'll spend, et cetera, et cetera. So it was pretty successful overnight. And I just have grown that up. And I got to a point a year ago, so it was almost exactly a year ago, where I suddenly realized, because it was slowly accumulating, that I had several boxes of bags that I couldn't send out to my customers on my website for one reason or another, because there was maybe a blemish on it, or the zipper was missing a pull, or, you know, some like very minor cosmetic flaw, but the bag was still in perfect condition.
Because the bag it's not a cheap bag, right?
It's not a cheap bag.
Yes.
Yeah, they retail for the average price point is $129. And so I can't send that, you know, to an online customer. And since I wasn't doing markets anymore, they were just sitting there. And so that's when I decided to start selling on Facebook, because I had seen some other people do this, and I actually had participated in some live Facebook sales for a friend of mine that was selling LuLaRoe. So a lot of LuLaRoe people were doing this because they have items that are unique that they wouldn't, you know, sell on a website. So the way that it works is they would hold up an item, they'd give it a number. If you want it, you'd comment sold and the number, and then you get it. Cool.
So in the comments section,
Yes.
you would type the 4 letters SOLD.
Yes.
Wow.
SOLD and then the number.
Oh.
I know, what a burden.
Your worst enemy there is success, because you're fulfilling all those orders.
Yeah. So I decided to copy that strategy. And the first sale that I did, it was I was live for about an hour, and I had 144 bags that I wanted to sell. And I gave each one of them a number, and I went through and I showed every single individual bag. Let me say first, I sent out a newsletter to my customers and let them know I was going to do this. Like, hey, you know, Friday at 5 o'clock, I'm going to be on Facebook Live and I'm going to sell a bunch of product for a discount. And boy, did people show up. So there was about 500 people that were watching this live video.
And can you tell us the size of your email list at that point?
It's about, at that point, it was probably about 26,000 people. So about 500 people showed up for this live sale, and I was selling the bags for $99. So they normally sell for like $129 to $149. So $99, and each bag I held up with the number, and at least 20 people were writing sold on each bag. And I couldn't see that because my phone was far enough in front of me, you know,
So streaming. You were broadcasting from your phone.
Yeah, so I couldn't see the comments.
Yeah,
so I was going on and talking about each item, and meanwhile people were like, you know, trying to buy it and like, move on, lady, you know. I had no idea. When I watched it back later, I was cracking up. But that was great. You know, after that sale was over, my body felt tingly. I was like, oh my gosh, that was amazing. This is something. I don't know what it is, but it's something.
And is this a year ago?
This was a year ago. This was last February.
Oh, I think Tyler mentioned last night that it was about a year ago that you came up with the idea.
Yeah. So that was great, you know, and we were excited. And then the next day, reality set in. And that was that we had sold technically 144 bags, which was $14,000 in revenue in an hour. So that's like, wow, cool, right? No, you have to go and track down every single one of those people. And now, after a little bit of time has lapsed, some of them changed their minds or they wanted something else. And so it took 2 of my employees 3 days to fulfill those orders, to reach out to people, get their email address, send them an invoice, you know, get them to pay the invoice, ship out the bag. So immediately I knew, okay, there's something here, and this is not the solution. I'm going to create it. And it didn't come to me right away. I did another sale because I wanted to keep doing it, because I wanted to keep figuring out like what was good and bad. And what
did you do the second time that you didn't do the first? Like, what was the first iteration for you?
So the second time, I didn't give each bag a number. I tried to lump bags together. So if I had, for instance, in the first sale, I had like 12 black brown leather bags, and I gave each one a number. The next time, I just gave one number and said I have 12 of these available. So the first 12 people who say sold will get it.
Okay.
So things like that.
And were these also with rejects or blemished?
Yes.
Okay.
So I had to explain that like the blemish is going to be a little bit different on each one, but whatever, you're getting a discount and this is going to make my life easier. And people did it. They didn't care. They just wanted it. And then the next thing I did after that, I actually at one point got away from doing the live video altogether and turned to doing photo albums because it just was too much of a pain. It just wasn't even worth it after a while. And that's when I decided to really, push this idea and
what did
go
the
for
photo
it.
albums solve that the live video?
The photo albums organize comments in an easier way.
In an easier way.
Yeah.
So people were commenting on a photo.
Yep.
Oh,
and you can
individual
see
photos.
individual photos, and you can see without any shred of doubt who was first, because that's the thing is that it would always turn into a big old problem because we had people taking screenshots and sending them to us. Like I commented before that person and you gave it to that person. And it's hard to explain to people that like when you're on a Facebook video, like it always shows you your comment first, so you think that your comment is first, even though it's not.
Oh, even though it's not.
And then sometimes our timestamp, like what we would see is a little bit different than what they would see. And then you'd go back the next day and the timestamps would be a little bit different for the different comments. I mean, it was just, it was a nightmare.
So to fast forward a bit, you then decided on this Lash.live concept. How did you convince investors to jump on? Was it sort of a no-brainer for them, or did you find yourself in the trenches with people who didn't get it, but ultimately did get it, or how did you go about that?
Yeah, so it was I pitched to people that had already invested in my other business. So that was easy. That was a no-brainer. They know me. They've seen what I've built. They trust me. They got the idea. I have a story. Hey, you guys know I'm doing this one thing. Okay, here's a better way to do it. I'm going to start a new company. All right, cool, I'm in. I mean, it was like that easy.
Right.
But I definitely also pitched other people outside of because I only have a handful of investors for Sash, and they're not sharks, they're not like big, huge ballers, they're just people I know. So I definitely did go out and pitch other people as well. And the idea was very well received. And we kind of started down a path of due diligence and, numbers and business plans and all that. But never even wound up moving forward with it just because the money that I raised from the initial investors has carried us through all, up until this point. And then I've put my own money into it. So we actually haven't needed to go back to any investors that are outside of our little circle.
We should talk to that CTO that built it so cheaply for you. Wow. So tell me a little bit about, so that's amazing. Do you feel like you're a tech entrepreneur now? Or
I don't see myself that way. It's funny because there's a group and it's like females in tech. I can't remember the name of the group, but it's something like that. And they've had a couple meetups and I've considered going, but I feel like such a poser because I think I'm really dating myself using that word, but
that's commonly referred to as the imposter syndrome.
Yes, imposter syndrome. Yes. Which, I understand what imposter syndrome is, and maybe this is that, but maybe it's also reality that just because I'm involved in a technology company doesn't mean I'm a tech person. I'm not. I'm a product and marketing person that had an idea that happened to be technology. If it was an idea that was food related, I wouldn't consider myself like a food expert. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've known you for a while now, and I just feel like you're the real deal as far as just see a problem, put yourself out there, face the risks, endure the uncertainties, and just do it.
Just embrace it.
Did you, just to go back to something I was anchored on with that you said earlier, What was your drive with Sash Bag to put yourself out there at the farmers markets or at the different markets? Like, did you just get a yes from the right person to make you believe in yourself at that point, or were there other factors?
So to be perfectly honest, it wasn't even my idea. I came from a background of retail and wholesale, and I've worked for other product-based companies where there was a formula: come up with idea, get idea made, put it in the hands of a sales rep, get it on a shelf, done, you know? And so that's my mentality, my world. I wanted to go to trade shows, and I realized pretty quickly that this product wasn't going to work the same way because it's not a widget, you know? It's complicated, it takes explanation, it's a lifestyle shift for women to give up their handbags. So I ran into issues right off the bat trying to figure out where and how to distribute it. So I reached out to a lady that I met. Her name is Gail Tauber, and she's the founder of Kashi, and she's here in San Diego. And I had connected with her, and that's a whole long story. But
That's not the cereal, is it?
Yeah, Kashi cereal, yeah. So I reached out to her wanting advice, and I knew she had
It's like that time I reached out to Bono for some advice on one of the songs I wrote, but I never got a response.
No? That's so weird. That's really strange.
Do you know him by any chance?
I don't.
Okay.
But I could.
I'm pretty damn sure you could. If there's ever one person I would like to meet, it's him. Okay, just putting it out there.
I'm gonna put that in
Thank
my
you.
basket.
Put that in your.
Okay. So reached out to her, wanted advice, wanted help with creating a retail strategy, and she said, "Why are you doing this? Just go sell your product to people." And it was like, duh.
Like, don't overthink this.
Yeah.
Just.
I was trying to create some like sophisticated, you know, complicated strategy when really I just need to be in front of people. That's it. It's so simple. And I don't know why it was like, duh, you know.
It's unblocked.
So that's what I started doing. I was just like, you're totally right. And I just started doing that and did it for a long time.
It's almost like the conversation we had with Lash, which was, yes, you can build it in such a way that can prove the metrics so that you can go raise money, or you could just build a product that people want and just
start
making money.
People use it. Yes.
So tell me a little bit about males and females in the tech space. One of my passions with 7 CTOs. So we're a network of CTOs, of which I think we have less than 5 women in our organization of almost 100. Makes me very sad. At the same time, I don't feel, being a white male, I don't feel equipped or have the taxonomy or the language, I feel always, or the platform to say, hey, if you're female and you're a tech lead, come and join us, without maybe sounding contrived or condescending. I don't know. So tell me a little bit about being a woman in tech, in as an entrepreneur. I think I'd love to be sort of candid about that and your experience. Sure. And then extrapolating that maybe towards how, as a society, we can encourage more of inclusivity, diversity, and in a sort of especially in the tech space, being white male dominated. How do we change that? So that's a big topic, but I would love to just get some of your sort of candid thoughts on all of that.
Well, I definitely have some thoughts on that, but what I would do is actually turn this question around on you. The interviewee is becoming the interviewer, and ask you, why is it important to you to have more women in your group? Because if you can define that and clearly understand what your why is, then and can share that, then it might happen more organically. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
So why do you want more women in your group?
I feel like the perspective, the way of thinking, again, right now I'm nervous that I'm stereotyping, but if I can answer without any fear, I feel like just the female brain and the male brain, just whether it's nurture or nature, it's different. And I've often been in conversations anywhere from, my wife to female business people to, female tech people. And yes, there's the logical conclusions that we come to if we say A implies B implies C. But when it comes to interpreting how to act on that data, I find the female perspective refreshing and interesting and essential and important.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it just from a very pragmatic standpoint, I mean, women are the majority of the consumer, right? The women make most of the purchasing decisions and household decisions. And when when products and services are being created without their involvement, you're going to miss more than you're going to hit, right? I think. I mean, we're not there yet, right? So this is a theory. But you're absolutely right. I think you need, in politics, in business, in households, in schools, in everything, you need to have that balance of not just male and female, but, different backgrounds and economic status and, everything in order to create anything that represents people in general. But I sympathize with your position because it's not like you created the culture that we're in personally. You're just in it and you want to be part of the solution. And everybody knows, we need more women in technology. So your awareness of that and your desire to fix that is really admirable. And I sympathize with it because it is hard. It is hard to come out. You can't just come out and say, I want more women in my business, because they're going to be like, well, why? Exactly. I don't want to just be there just to be, a statistic for you or help you get funding or whatever, So that's why I think as long as you're being authentic in your messaging and what you're trying to look for, you don't even have to say I'm looking for a woman. You can say I'm looking for this perspective. If you fit this, if this is your perspective, I want you on my team, and you're probably going to get more women that are going to apply. Just an idea, just a theory.
It's helpful
because it's not really about male and female. It's about contribution and ideas and perspective. Everybody's perspective is a little bit different based on your life experiences.
It's just so in South Africa we have the black and white empowerment issues. But I feel in South Africa it's been named and it's become government policy. So it's really not a colloquial issue anymore. It's just an execution issue. And of course that is flawed as well because I know of many, black business people who are on boards simply because they then fulfill some quota, which then allows for them to tender for government projects. And so that I think is the one end of the spectrum that you don't want to go towards. But I think the other end might be worse, which is it's unnamed. No one can talk about it. It's this sickness in our society that everyone's too afraid to touch because for fear of saying the wrong thing or going about it the wrong way.
Well, I think that the biggest impact that you could have as a man is not to try and recruit women into your organization, but to try and change the mindset of the men who are in your organization. Because if men can get on the same page about the value of having women on their team, it'll be a safer and more productive place for women when they arrive, so they don't leave, or so they feel more confident, even applying or trying to be part of a team, because they know that they're being surrounded by men who want them there, who respect them. I mean, that's the biggest problem for me is I tend to purposely avoid co-working spaces or conferences or, any sort of business development things that are, if I know that I'm going to be one of the few females there, I just don't even want to go because you kind of get that. This is, and it goes both ways. Like, this is going to sound really stereotypical and maybe unfair, but these are my experiences. You have that sort of, bro culture that takes over and you feel uncomfortable. Sometimes it's subtle and sometimes it's very vulgar and specific, and there's sexual harassment, there's innuendos, there's all kinds of things that you're subjected to when you put yourself in that mix of people. Whereas I know if I go to an all-female co-working space or an all-female led conference, it just eliminates even the possibility of it.
Yeah.
So I know I'm going to go there. I'm always going to be productive. I'm always going to feel safe. I'm always going to feel supported because I'm surrounded by women. If I go into a space where I'm surrounded by men, I don't know that. It's a gamble. And that's just a reality. So.
And what do you think about men going to an all-female workplace?
I think that's great. I think the more.
But do you think that men would feel the same discomfort?
I don't know, because I can't speak to that. But I think if you look at just the statistics around sexual harassment and crime, sex crimes and all that, is usually, a male attacking a female. It isn't often the other way around. So I don't think that level of fear is there for men being around women as much as it is for women being around men.
Maybe, so maybe we're in a phase, or in the generation, hopefully it's not a whole generation, but maybe we're in the phase now with Me Too and all that, where men are, the awareness levels are going up of, the things that you never had to think about when interacting in public spaces is now something, there are certain things that you have to consider.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that is laying the foundation now for sort of if I can call it that safe space.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we're in that preparation phase now, the purging phase, where at the extreme you have sexual harassment, overt, but at the other end you have just a general awareness that certain jokes are not funny and really shouldn't be made, even if you're in an all, male environment.
Mm-hmm.
And so that language gets cleaned up, the perspectives and the opinions get cleaned up, that then creates that environment for that inclusivity. Do you think that that's possibly happening right now?
I think it's definitely happening. But I don't know how authentic it is. That's the thing, is the intent can be there, the language can be there, the social media around it can be there. But I had an experience just as recent as a few days ago where I was at a conference and I got up and walked out because I was so highly offended by this man who was on stage, who made a really rude comment about women. And it would have been nice to see a man get up and walk out. You wouldn't. Maybe you would. I shouldn't say that, but I mean, in this instance, what if one of the men putting on this conference made a statement about it, instead of me having to be the one making a statement about it?
Do you think we're headed towards that? I mean, I wonder what the fallout would be from that specific example, if any. My gut says nothing's going to come of it.
What do you mean?
That episode where you heard something in a public forum, I'm wondering if there will be any sort of repercussion there.
I doubt it.
Yeah.
I doubt it. I doubt it, because the person who did this, part of his story was how he's such good buddies with the men who put on the conference. So this is why I'm saying, like, even, beyond trying to support women and create a space for them, if you as a leader of your community are encouraging the men and supporting the men and upholding that belief, and that integrity, I think that's where it needs to start.
Wow. Yeah, I'm working with someone to formulate our official code of conduct, and it's interesting for me to even read what we're coming up with, what we find acceptable and what is absolutely not allowed in our organization. And so a couple learning experiences for me is just having sort of an ignorant approach to a code of conduct, where I was thinking, well, we don't really need a code of conduct. We just be
use common sense.
Just use
be
common
normal.
sense. Be normal. But that is an ignorant approach. I mean, I think you have to say what you want and what you don't want when it comes to an organization or a company culture. I think it's too easy, and I think for me it's a cop-out. For me personally, I'm realizing that it's too comfortable to say, oh no, I don't take a stance on, you guys figure it out. I think codes of conduct are becoming essential, and I think that conference, if they didn't have one, should have had one where that person would have immediately have been publicly disqualified or reprimanded for breaking the code of conduct. The second thing is I host a lot of meetups in the dev space with developers, and I'll never forget a comment I got one time where my one of my meetups, which was a hackathon style meetup, always emphasized the fact that there was pizza and beer, and it took a lady in our group to tell me that in and of itself alienates women, because the association with pizza and beer is that it's that bro culture. And she recommended I just maybe change beer to wine, or add wine in there, or drinks, or just soften that language a bit, which at the time I was completely shocked. Not only, I was thinking, man, what kind of world are we going to live in if I can't even use the word beer, But at the same time, I was thinking, I was also shocked at my bias in terms of, I would never, ever, ever have thought I could be inclusive and I could want women there, but just the language I'm using, the taxonomy that I'm in is by nature exclusive.
Yeah, and so that's a double-edged sword too. So this is why I re-emphasize that I sympathize with the situation you're in, because then if people would have known that you changed beer to wine to try and get more women there, then they would be like, why are you doing that? Why are you assuming like I like wine? Like I like beer. I like pizza and beer. Stop, not giving me pizza and beer. So it's hard.
It's tough.
And but it's real, and you're gonna get reactions either way. You're gonna get people who think that you're not including them because it's pizza and beer, and you're gonna get people that are upset that you're trying to feed them wine because they're female. So I think you just have to know what your intentions are, be very clear on that, what your goals are, and just be as authentic as possible and as open, like that. You were open to that. You weren't like, screw that. You were like, oh, I want to do the right thing. Wanting to do the right thing, that's it. That's all you have to do, and you're not always going to get it right.
Yeah, and maybe that is the non-verbal communication that is necessary in this environment. Is you're saying one thing, but what is your non-verbal behavior saying? And hopefully that is the authenticity and the inclusiveness. The third thing I learned was just recent, was with our hackathons again. I had one of our women CTOs joined me in hosting some of these hackathons. And the hackathon, you solve the problem and then you present your code, and then people like CTO types would provide some feedback. And it took her to raise my awareness levels of how critical my language was, and how, and I'm not, this might not be a male-female thing, but it was amazing for me how she was able to soften my feedback in a way that wasn't breaking the spirits of these young developers. And she pulled me aside after one of these events and just said, that there are women in the audience, and they're not only young people and junior people, but it's male, female, and I should really, instead of focusing on what they didn't do, maybe focus on what they did do. So while it is generally it's good advice, it's not necessarily genderized. It was amazing for me that it took her to come to me and just give me that perspective, which I found incredibly valuable. And it could have come from a man as well.
Well, that's why. So remember when we first started this conversation, I said, if you know what kind of perspective you need, like what is it that you're missing, that's the perspective you were missing. And like you said, it could have been a male or a female. It happened to be a female. And it probably more often than not would be a female in that perspective if we're stereotyping, which stereotypes are stereotypes for a reason. I'm sorry, but they are, that women do tend to have a softer way of communicating. So if that's what you needed, that's what would show up. So knowing what you need, communicating what you need, and allowing it to show up, you're going to get the females there if you're really clear about what that perspective is.
The journey continues. Nichole?
Yes.
This was amazing.
Really?
I feel like I could do this for 3 more hours.
I know. Well, let's do it,
There's
and then
no
we'll
wine.
just turn the
There's
cameras
no.
off.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. It was so wonderful.
Have you chatted with a CTO lately?